June 5th, 2026, I wrote a piece called What Words Remain Can Sing This Sadness. In it, I tried to connect past to present. I tried to make sense of a world that is still, in 2026, genocidally complicit. How can we still be letting genocides like Gaza or Sudan or Myanmar happen? And why are those with power and privilege, our politicians, our media, silent? Or at least very, very quiet. June 5th, 2026 was the 59th anniversary of the Naksa. Naksa is an Arabic word meaning relapse, as in an illness or a reverse or a setback or a debacle. The Naksa, with a capital N, was a word marking an ugly 1967 act of Israeli state terrorism. The Naksa marked Israel's preemptive and unprovoked attack on Egypt and its subsequent and bloody war with Jordan and Syria. 280,000 to 325,000 Palestinians were violently expelled from the West Bank and Gaza Strip in those 6 days of terror. And the Naksa was yet more bloody ethnic cleansing of indigenous Palestinians from the land they once used to call their home. The Naksa was a violent, tyrannical, unprovoked expansion of an illegally expansionist occupying Israeli state. Israel, through the Naksa, managed to illegally annex the Sinai Peninsula, Gaza Strip, West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights to the lands they'd already stolen. Resolution 242 from the UN still, to this day, affirms the illegality of Israel's 1967 actions. During the Naksa, Israel not only escalated its ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, it also attacked its own ally, the United States. On June 8, 1967, Israeli fighter jets and torpedo boats struck the USS Liberty in international waters, killing, 34 crew members and injuring 171. And through all of this, global North, white, Western media from the US to Australia remained quiet, complicit, uncritical, just as they are today in the face of Israel's 2026 continuation of its decades-long genocide of Palestinians. And I noticed then, looking back in all the reports, as I noticed now, the same evil repetition. More and more comfy, corporate, white, mostly male media muppets making dodgy deals with fascist devils. Karl Stefanovic's interview with Tommy Robinson, a far-right British agitator with a long record of hate speech, was the clearest example this past month of a white Australian male media figure courting fascist fealty for clicks. And when I wrote What Words Remain Can Sing This Sadness on the June 5th Naksa anniversary last month, the misogynist most brazenly selling his corporate soul was new ABC Drive Time host Charlie Pickering. His version of fascist friendliness was to team up with ex-IDF far-right fascist influencer Avi Yemeni and publicly target and eviscerate a woman, Grace Tame. A message to you, Charlie. An open letter to ABC celebrity Charlie Pickering for his and others' opportunistic and unprincipled attack on Grace Tame. Paul Evans, July 10, 2026. Dear Charlie, last month at the start of June 2026, you attended an anti-Grace Tame rally outside the ABC and you allowed yourself to be interviewed by far-right provocateur, fascist influencer and ex-IDF war criminal sniper Avi Yemeni. Conveniently for the public reach of your recently promoted media profile, you chose to speak with this turd just one day after you'd started a lucrative new appointment as ABC Radio's Drive Time host. It was a time when unfettered public attention, good or bad, would be a boon to rating figures for you, I'm sure, Charlie. How very strategic. But why am I writing to you now, Charlie, 1 month later? I mean, you're not the worst corporate white male oppressor of this past month in Australia. In a month where Karl Stefanovic chose to cozy up with fascist Tommy Robinson, others have clearly lapped you in those far-right fascist stakes. But when every day delivers worse and worse, the ugly weight of each new fucker makes each previous fucker easier to forget. And forgetting is how bastards like you win, Charlie. You see, while Grace Tame still struggles to navigate a world still poisoned by the uncapped bile of misogynist, racist and genocide apologists mobilised that day by Abiy Yemeni and you, Yemeni's gormless fascist foot soldier, your own public profile stocks have seemed to rise. Comfy, complacent and coddled by media elites in your cushy drive time radio role, you've managed to muddy your own tepid left-sided mask enough to be now viable for the right-wing mindless Kyle and Jackie O evacuees, as if nothing happened. Charlie, I'm writing to you because we live in a public media ecosystem that rewards the Carly Minnicks of this world with increased reach and white supremacist support for posting a picture of herself doing a Nazi salute, while Grace Tame, standing against fascism, misogyny and a genocide, gets blasted and marginalised in an effort to do a podcast on autism. And that seems to me profoundly unfair. Stefanovic and Minnick literally increase their earnings and outreach because they engage with fascism. Tame is censored and censured because she calls for an end to a genocide. And you, Charlie, you complain about words. Apparently, according to you, those of us involved in the pro-Palestinian activism movement don't somehow understand the words we use. Apparently certain phrases, and you at first conveniently and mysteriously don't specify which words, because you know that lies like that don't hold up against the glare of actual scrutiny. Those words, according to you, seem to apparently carry meanings beyond what we ourselves seem to realise, as if you have some secret connection to the meaning of words that we obviously do not.
Oh, Charlie, what is this dictionary from which you make these unspoken inferences? Please tell us. Who do you think decides the true meaning of language? Which authority ordains it, commissions it, polices it? Yours, Charlie? And why should that authority, the paternalistic authority of the state in a repressive society, override the intentions and understandings of those who actually use the words we speak? So let's look at the word intifada, shall we? Because you won't say it, but that's the word you're cowardly slinking around without naming it, isn't it? Like many other political terms, the word intifada carries a particular meaning depending on whether you're naming a genocide or whether you're the one being accused of that genocide. Some of us hear a call for liberation from military occupation. That's us. That's me. Others hear a call to violence. That'd apparently be you. And those committing the genocide. And those defending those committing a genocide. Or running cover for those committing a genocide. You see, Charlie, as is clearly happening here, you've been in this game long enough and mixed with enough people on the left to know that public debate on anything of consequence and controversy is usually framed as though only one side is legitimate. And that framing always comes at the behest of those already exerting that power, the power we, using that word, wish to uncloak, to unmask, to name. The underlying logic becomes paternalistic in favour of the power structures oppressing and therefore with something to hide. The paternalistic oppressive logic goes like this. I know what this slogan really means. The people using it do not. That same paternalism appeared when you suggested that Grace Tame was ignorant, Charlie. Grace Tame is ignorant of what precisely, Charlie? You may disagree with Grace Tame's views, Charlie. You may disagree with her humanity, Charlie. But disagreement is not evidence of ignorance, is it, Charlie? Especially if that disagreement has been framed by those trying to apply the smoke and mirrors to avoid being accused of genocide. It's the same pattern that fascism uses all the time. It's the ad hominem favoured by fascists like Trump, and typical of all empire complicit vilifications. indeed of all racist slurs since time immemorial. It's the lazy thought pattern where accusation replaces argument, label replaces evidence, character assassination replaces discussion. And once again, the powerless and the marginalised disappear from view. So let's look at your attack on former Australian of the Year, Grace Tame. Shall we, Charlie? What's this all about, Charlie? Why are you attacking a woman who has been a courageous advocate about campaigning against sexual violence upon women and who is now hosting a podcast on autism? It's not because the announcement of the Grace Tame show is new. Oh, and speaking of new, congrats on the new 774 drive time slot, Charlie. Oh, that's it, isn't it? You're doing a Kyle, aren't you, Charlie? You're stirring up controversy by picking an easy target you know far-right listeners want to hate. Oh, Charlie, are you that desperate for your little show to be a success that you'd sell your soul to truckers and traffickers of hate, to dealers of trolling, and to the lacking character assassins doing the evil work of empire? Are you that worried no one's going to listen to you? Did the ABC put you up to this? Or have you decided on your own and your lonesome that you'd like to have those trigger-happy fascist rage baiters as part of your audience so you can start pocketing some of that sweet, sweet Kyle and Jackie O cash? Let's see, you've really gone all out on this, haven't you, Charlie? You've gotten all those headlines on the week your new show started by having Avi Yemeni interview you and post it everywhere. You must know who Avi Yemeni is, don't you, Charlie? After all, you possess some kind of omniscient knowledge about the meanings of words that the rest of us don't possess, so you must know Avi Yemeni too, right? You must know that Avi Yemeni is an Australian-Israeli, a far-right commentator who since 2020 has worked as an Australian correspondent for Rebel News, a Canadian far-right website. You must know that Avi Yemeni is guilty of assaulting his former wife. And you must have a skerrick of sensitivity as to how fucking ironic, Charlie, considering what Grace Tame experienced. And you must therefore understand the sheer fucking vile hypocrisy of claiming tone deafness in your railings against Grace Tame when you choose to let this piece of human shit interview you. You must know that, for instance, Avi Yemeni was also banned from Victorian Parliament precinct, that he's been barred from social media for hate speech. And you must know that Avi Yemeni fought in the IDF, openly admitting to being a sniper who sniped children in Gaza and therefore actively, willingly, knowingly participated in the active genocide of Palestinian people. And fucking bragged about it and set up a Krav Maga business in Caulfield to cash in on it. You must know these things. And Avi Yemeni is the one interviewing you in this viral turd of TV and Twitter coverage that has ensured that everyone now knows about your new show. What an interesting little insight into what and who you view as problematic, Charlie. You have a problem with Grace Tame hosting a podcast on autism. You regard Grace Tame, a principled women's rights advocate, as problematic. And yet, you regard a convicted wife-beater, serial hate speech agitator and killer of children as not. What a lovely little insight into your moral framework, Charlie. And yet, you deign to lecture us on the morality of words. How fucking dare you? Your performance on Tuesday, June 2nd, reminded me of the very last time I willingly watched you on any platform on the episode from late 2023 of The Weekly with Charlie Pickering when you tried to play October 7 for laughs. For laughs, fuck you. Not only disrespecting the victims of that day and the multitudinously more already by then Palestinians who were being ripped from life in the most horrific of ways via phosphorus bombs, drone attacks, and seeing their children deliberately shot in the head or just being sniped off one by disgusting snipers like that fucking little evil piece of shit you let interview you on Tuesday. But even then, reaching for the apologism of a corrupt, genocide complicit status quo, you complained even then in 2023 about the protesters and about people trying to make sense of this Holocaust-level human tragedy on social media, when our mainstream and legacy media were already trying to pull the smoke screens and misdirections to genocide by platforming a doctored piece of shitty audio at the October 9 Opera House protest to already then frame protesters as the problem, when even then Israel was committing genocide. And that's why, in the words of the faux rage comedy bit you did every week in 2023, in that last series I'll ever watch of you doing anything, I'm going to say, you're cancelled. That's why I'll never watch anything or listen to anything you're on ever again. You can have your far right listeners, you'll never have me. Be happy together. And see, the housewife and I refused to even watch the episode of the otherwise wickedly funny Guy Mont's Spelling Bee this week. Yes, on the episode you timed yourself to be on the week your 774 show began. And so in that effort to gain the clicks and likes and views to advertise your silly little new radio program, you framed Grace Tame's comments as problematic. Not because you could articulate any harm, because you couldn't. Not because you could identify any factual inaccuracy, because you couldn't. Not because you could point to any real-world consequence, because you couldn't. But because, as you put it, as a Jewish Australian, there is a complete misunderstanding of a lot of the words that are said. Words. For fuck's sake, are they like the words deliberately doctored or at least platformed by Australian legacy media on the October 9 Sydney Opera House march? So misshapen is the truth in the shitty media that you've helped make. There are many who still believe people said that, when every analysis said it was deliberately doctored by those who wanted to justify and celebrate committing a genocide. Is that like the word rape, which power elites were already falsely misdirecting as having been supposedly systematically done by the oppressed, when every one of them knew, and the rest of us became more and more aware, especially in these last few months with all of the reports and proof, that the use of rape as a tool of systematic oppression upon the oppressed has always been the tool of choice of the oppressor. The choice of those in power, the choice of empire, and therefore the choice of Israel. And the proof has come out in the last couple of months in countless reports of rape used as a tool of torture, not just on the Palestinians, but even on flotilla activists. And it's this that the vile media hellscape of complicit Australia tries to foist back onto Grace Tame, a victim of and campaigner against rape. Who's tone deaf now, Charlie? And with Avi Yemeni, and with every other pearl-clutching Zionist apologist for genocide, you, Charlie, replace political analysis with personal sentiment, and then treat that sentiment as though it's unchallengeable. It's the move that allows someone like you to avoid ever engaging with the actual meaning of a word like intifada, which means uprising, resistance, liberation, and instead smuggle in the unspoken presumption that that word is somehow inherently violent, inherently anti-Semitic, inherently illegitimate. It's not. It's about resistance to occupation. To frame such a word as anti-Semitic is as vile as the claim made by Nazis that those responsible for the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising were guilty of their later demise. It's obscene. It's the move that allows someone to erase the entire historical record of the First Intifada, overwhelmingly civil disobedience, boycotts, mass organising, and replace it with this cartoonish fantasy of barbarism. Have you even ever bothered to look up the word Intifada, Charlie? Even in this mythical dictionary of yours, which seems to be hidden to the rest of us, to do a modicum of basic research. The people using the word intifada to mean supposedly anti-Semitic violence are people like Ben Gvir, Netanyahu, elites with oil drilling licenses in the Golan Heights like Rupert Murdoch, people who are paid by a state committing genocide like Mark Liebler or Michelle Gunn or Calvin Healy of The Australian, and people who've dined with actual Nazi Nick Fuentes like Donald Trump, and people with fascist policies in their election platforms like Pauline Hanson, and all those apologists who believe their lies and keep echoing them like you, those with fascist axes to grind. You're calmly sitting down next to the genocidal chopping block with actual fascists who, when you speak like this, Charlie, you're part of the cynical, evil, Bondi-abusing narrative that allows someone to pretend that the phrase globalise the Intifada was ever a mainstream chant before Murdoch outlets conveniently and cynically invented it as a headline after December 14 last year. It wasn't, it never was. That too was a fabrication by those in power. The particular arrangement of words globalising Intifada was never used to my, admittedly incomplete, knowledge in any pro-Palestinian march I'd attended. To be clear, I'm not claiming that the phrase globalised the Intifada had never existed. It probably did. Of course it probably did. This is a big world. And of course people have probably used it in essays, in academic tomes, in pamphlets. But in the clumsy, complicit, lazy way of legacy media, these journalists just grab a line that gets the most outrage in their story, the most clicks, the most anger, the most follow-on, because in legacy media it's never about truth. Because that phrase never lived in my memory before Bondi, nor in any of the pro-Palestinian marches I attended. For one, the phrase doesn't scan well. Nothing much even rhymes with it. It's got no rhythm. But the phrase, "there is only one solution, Intifada revolution," yes, now that's a phrase. That's a chant. That's a revolution of shaking off. That has rhythm and rhymes, and it's a phrase I've chanted countless times, loudly, proudly, and will again and again until Palestinians are free from this genocide, free of apartheid, until Palestinians are allowed to go home peacefully in the lands they've lived before it was stolen in 1948, to come home as Resolution 194, never rescinded and repeated every year since, commanded way back in 1948 and has commanded ever since. But every one of us who's seen the phosphorus bombs used on Palestinians and the southern Lebanese and Iranians these past 2.5 years of genocide knows that even the phrase Intifada revolution never actually means, to those of us using it, taking up arms ourselves against the most evil and wealthiest and best equipped army on the planet. What do you think? We're fucking crazy? The interpretation of the word Intifada as cartoonish violence is the interpretation of the violent power elites who know only one way themselves, violence. No, let me tell you about words, Charlie, to you who claims to know all words. Intifada to us means BDS. Boycott, divest, sanction. Intifada means pressuring governments. Intifada means protest. Intifada means disruption, yes. It means civil disobedience. Have you ever read Henry David Thoreau, Charlie? Civil disobedience was the essence of both intifadas, Charlie. The sort of civil disobedience that led to the suffragette movement getting governments around the world to let women vote. The sort of civil disobedience that allowed supporters of Gandhi to pressure the British to finally get the fuck out of India in 1947. The sort of civil disobedience that led to the civil rights movement. Yes, the elites then called Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King and Malcolm X terrorists, didn't they? Let that piece of historicity sink in and think about the side you're on now, Charlie. The sort of civil disobedience that opposed the Vietnam War, Charlie. The sort of civil disobedience that led to the overthrow of apartheid South Africa, Charlie. And again, the elites called Nelson Mandela a terrorist too, didn't they, Charlie? And the forces of oppression got violent with them too, Charlie. And with all of them who stood up against injustice in a corrupt world. As sometimes in the violent police states of Victoria and New South Wales and Queensland, and throughout this genocide complicit land, the forces of oppression and repression get violent with us too. Charlie. That's when the word intifada takes on its shades and shadows of violence, Charlie. When the violence is directed at us, Charlie. At us. For fuck's sake, Charlie. Even trying to deliver baby formula and medical supplies to Gaza means that one gets beaten, humiliated and raped by the corrupt protectors of the Israeli state. An intifada means telling our government to stop giving money to and supplying bombs and explosives and ammunition and bomb parts to those enacting this UN-documented actual genocide that is one part of this thing that you refuse to say, Charlie. Intifada means shaking off, Charlie. Always has. The only people framing it as terrorism are those who always have to accuse others of the crimes of which they themselves have been guilty for 78 years. So yes, shaking off, Charlie. It means shaking off. And if you're going to ban the word intifada, Charlie, you're going to have to ban Tay Tay too. You know it's a fiction, Charlie. A propaganda line, a deliberate misrepresentation designed to smear a movement calling for an end to genocide. But you treat that fiction as fact because it's politically convenient to do so, because there's traction in the misogynistic attacks on people like Grace Tame or Antoinette Lattouf. It's not ignorance on our part, Charlie. It's manufactured ignorance on yours, the kind that sleeps with fascism. When far-right Rebel News interviewer Avi Yemeni asked you whether people can still plead ignorance, your response was a cowardly mumble about people jumping on protest bandwagons, as though the hundreds of thousands of Australians who have marched for months and months and years are frivolous trend chasers rather than people acting out of moral clarity and moral conscience. You imply that solidarity itself is suspect, Charlie. You imply that the problem is not the genocide, but the people who dare to speak about it. And then, when pressed with one of Avi's misogynistic Dorothy Dixer questions, do you think Grace Tame is ignorant? You said yes. It's easier to call a woman ignorant than to confront the reality she is naming, Charlie, isn't it? It's easier to pathologise her language than to acknowledge the mass graves, the amputated children, the starvation, the rubble, the live-streamed annihilation of a people. It's easier to scold a survivor of sexual violence for using the wrong word than it is to admit that Israel is committing a genocide. Your entire performance rests on a single unspoken presumption that Palestinians and Israelis are equal combatants, equal agents, equal powers. That the word intifada is dangerous to you and to people like you because it implies violence against and imagines symmetry. The solidarity that speaks of intifada is irresponsible to genocide apologists like you because it disrupts the fantasy of imbalance. But there is no balance. There is no symmetry. There is no equivalence, is there? There is an occupying nuclear state and an occupied, starved, bombed, displaced, besieged people who have been besieged and battered and raped and abused and murdered and displaced and ethnically cleansed and genocided since 1948. Your refusal to name this is complicity. It's complicity in genocide. All those like you who use public platforms to further exonerate this genocide, to distract from its vile inhumanity. And those like Avi Yemeni who interview you or anyone else who defends this has blood on their hands. In the case of your interviewer, actual blood on their hands, history will judge you either with the cowardice of Chamberlain or the complicity of Eichmann. Your insistence that the real issue is the vocabulary of those protesting is just a vile smokescreen to conceal a genocide. It's propaganda. You see, the most obscene part of all of this is that you never once ever acknowledged the actual subject of the conversation, the genocide itself, the mass death, the starvation, the rubble, the children, the bodies, the live-streamed horror. You spoke only of feelings, optics, discomfort, and the imagined sins of activists. You're the polite, smiling, soft-spoken face of propaganda. Sorry, fuck the propaganda. Fuck the lies. Enough.
You see, this is not a message to you alone, Charlie. It's a message to every soft-spoken custodian of empire like you, who mistakes tone for truth, comfort for morality, clicks for connection. History will not remember your feelings. It will remember the slain your words concealed. It will remember those who spoke for justice, like us, and those who hid behind cheap semantics and cozy convenience, like you. Like you, Charlie.